finally becoming kind of mainstream, I think, where it's like, okay, I want one liquid. And then depending upon what the goal is for that car, I could switch up the pad.
By building this product with you, we solved that problem. There's no more dusting.
Abrasives are basically rocks. And so you have rocks in this liquid. A diminishing abrasive would be starts as a big rock and goes to a small rock as you work it on the panel. And then a non-diminishing would be, it would stay the same size the whole time you're working it.
Wait a minute, what are we talking about here? We're talking about paint finish. You don't have that many options. If you do this wrong, you're going to burn through the paint. You really don't, on a new car, you don't have that many chances to get it right.
And that's why, I'm definitely trying to take the In-N-Out burger approach versus the McDonald's approach. And we see a lot of those, we see a lot of the, especially recently, a lot of the McDonald's approaches to car care, I think. Yep. There we go. All right, everybody. Welcome back. I'm back with Tom. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Jimbo. Good to see you.
You too. And so I'm on this, the next thing is pads, figuring out what buffing pads. And I've been actually, so when we first did a podcast together, I didn't realize how, I didn't understand the compound and polish side of the industry like I understand it now, as far as how passionate people are about it. And then trying to figure out pads. I just kind of had my method, my system down for the most part. And then when I started to try to figure out what pads would work best for this new polish and compound, it was kind of like, well, I don't know. I was kind of starting from ground zero, and it's been a very big learning curve for me in something that I thought I knew how to do, but I guess we could start by talking about like the people behind that are so passionate about polishes and compounds, very interesting segment.
Yeah, I think it's, coming out of the body shop industry and, working in my dad's shop as a boy, all my buddies would find out, oh, my dad's got a body shop. Hey, can I come up there and wax my car? And back then, we're talking in the early 70s, nobody was really interested in cleaning the inside of their guy. Everybody did wherever they could, but it's back east. It's raining one day, snowing the next day, super hot. So the insides of cars, but the outside of cars, boy, everybody wanted it as shiny as you possibly could get it. And that's how I grew up, so as I got into, this whole idea of making my own polish, it's a, boy, you will see people so absolutely passionate about taking every tiny little scratch out of their car, and they want to make it nice.
And I was always under the impression, and it was wrong, come to find out, but I was always under the impression from a brand standpoint that, a lot of brands don't have a compounded polish, but then there's other brands that only do compounds and polishes. And then, but I was under the impression that they were kind of like slower moving products, slower moving SKUs, because you don't use all that much in the detail space. You don't use all that much per car, certainly not as much as say like a car soap or something like that. And so because they were slower movers, the innovation wasn't there, right? And that's why we had a lot of products that weren't, hadn't evolved, I guess. I was so wrong in that. They're big movers.
Oh yeah,
they're like
big movers,
very popular products.
And I think if you have something that people want, I think it becomes foundational to your brand. I look at big companies who have a big name selling quick detailer, but they never really became that big company. That they just don't have, muscle behind them. But when we launched System 1 that first time, it was unbelievable how we grew through this market, because so many people wanted something that really worked without all the distractions. Because I look at these and they have a compound for doing this, a compound for doing that, and and they're so it's like, what if somebody picks up the wrong product and uses it on their black vehicle? Well, you're going to put scratches in it, but then nobody wants anything to do with that brand anymore. It's like, no, you ruined my car. I got to go pay a detailer now to take care of this. So I think, what we're doing here is so important.
That's an interesting thought I've never thought about. And when you start to think about it, it's so true. Like the bigger brands all have compounds and polishes.
Yeah, they do.
Wow.
They do.
So it's interesting. When you said that, it just dawned on me of like, wow, that is true. And when you look at Meguiar's, 3M, 3D, even Chemical Guys has a pretty stout, I'm not sure they're good, but they have a pretty stout paint correction system. And when you start to really look at, wow, that's interesting. That I'd never thought about that before. Like all the really, really bigger brands, I guess with the exception of Turtle Wax, really. But they did come out with their one and done, which I think is being discontinued right now. But so yeah, it really is foundational to a brand, huh?
I mean, you know how crazy I am about this. I mean, I'm insane about this. I know I am. I had a customer call me. I'm on my way to work. I've got an hour and a half drive sometimes. I live in LA, work in Anaheim. But this customer is like, Tom, I got a brand new black pickup truck. It was beautiful. We just went through a super hard winter. I belong to a club where they wash my vehicle every single week. Car wash. Now it's springtime and my truck looks totally destroyed. I go, okay, you're the perfect customer. And this is what I would say to anybody making compound to sell to that customer. What are you going to sell him to fix his car? Because if you told him to use compound on that vehicle, you just destroyed his pickup truck. His brand new pickup truck that he just bought before winter, you just destroyed it. And so I would never, ever, ever want to do that. And there's no reason, based on definitely the stuff that we're doing, there is no reason to ever touch that car with anything more aggressive than, what you now have.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I really, through this journey have really figured out is like, okay, there's going to be, because I didn't know there was so many passionate people about this, right? And so I knew what I wanted. I knew exactly what I wanted. I just didn't know that there was some very passionate people. But really, it came down to the same thesis that you had when you started System One way back in the day. It's like, can we, and it's finally becoming kind of mainstream, I think, where it's like, okay, I want one liquid. And then depending upon what the goal is for that car, I could switch up the pad. But that's where I started to get kind of messed up, is because I was like, okay, I know, and we've shown in videos on YouTube, like a rotary and wool is like, it's going to do what you need to do, right? You pretty much are never going to need to go any crazier than that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then on the opposite side of that, you have like a finishing pad, which will remove the rotary marks and kind of finish out the paint perfectly. But to your point with that story of like that guy who goes through winter and then he comes out and, his car looks like a mess and he wants to clean it up. I don't know, but I'm not sure that guy is willing to go rotary, right? No. Sit on the car for a couple hours and then, finish with a foam pad. So that person who I'm really going for is looking for a one pad, one liquid system, right?
Exactly.
And so though I need it to work for the high and uptight guy who's going to go, rotary, maybe even sand and then rotary with wool. I want the product to work for him too.
Yeah.
I want it to finish out perfectly, right? Yep. So it needs to work, but we nailed that right away, right? And then where I totally got hung up is in this middle ground of like, okay, I want to get the paint as good as possible, but cut and finish nice and as best as possible, right? So when you were picking out pads for CSI, that's my thinking behind it all.
Yeah.
But when you were developing CSI, and I know the market's a little different for CSI, and now System 1 is different from CSI, but like, how did you go about picking and finding and settling on, because that's what I'm having a hard time, not picking the pads, it's settling on being satisfied with the cut and finish that I'm getting out of one.
And I think this is absolutely the most important question, what you're asking right there. And it's, I mean, from day one, when I started System 1, it wasn't ever to like, hey, use our product because it's the best. No, no, no. Listen to what I'm, guys, this is the struggle that I've been in my whole entire life, and this is what fixed it. So for me, you got to have, just like what you're talking about for that guy who's just got a light scratch from the brushes in a car wash. It's not anything major. They'll come right out. But you could seriously do a lot of damage if you were to compound that vehicle. I think you'd, and I would say this to anybody out there making compound and polish combinations. You are destroying the market. You're not helping people. So we have to figure out one pad for light scratches, and then we have an in-between system that will further enhance that system, and then we have the super aggressive system of I'm going to use a chainsaw, rotary polisher, because I've already got some experience. This particular customer that I talked to this morning, and it was amazing that he called me, because now we've got, this subject, which is a great subject. And he was so petrified at using any kind of tool, never used a tool ever in his life. I said, don't worry. The DA polisher is super easy to use. You just lay it on the surface and, control your pressure. And, this will totally do what you want it to do. So he was like, oh, okay. Wow. Is that, and I think the industry, because, when we look at our competition from every single person that I basically know in this industry that makes product against me, they still say that this single product program has, areas that it can work and areas that it can work. And I say, no, you're totally wrong. I say, take every single product that you make and throw it in the trash can. You only need to have one product to help.
Can we take a tangent? Not to cut you off, but I want to take a tangent just for people who may be jumping in just for the first time. Can we talk about the main difference between a compound and and a polish? Because I know, I think we've covered it before, but I just, as a refresher tangent, I think it'll be applicable to what we're talking about. What is the main difference between what effectively is labeled a compound and what is labeled a polish?
Great question. As I'm a formulator, they're formulators. Nobody calls up, their raw materials people and says, I need the products to make a compound. They go, what? What's compound? To a chemist, they don't know what compound is. They don't know what polish is. We're going to come up with those terms. So the market says, for the last 100 years, that we needed to use compound. Basically, a very heavy grit product that supposedly breaks down. And that, in theory, that's great, but it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that completely. So yes, it breaks down somewhat, but there's also big boulders in there that aren't broken down.
So would that be diminishing abrasives versus non-diminishing abrasives, or is that okay?
And again, these are terms that we're defining but are not really defined. It's like ceramic. What's ceramic?
I was just going to say, it's like ceramic. Ceramic isn't a raw ingredient, right?
There's no such thing as
There's no
ceramic,
such thing
you
as
know.
ceramic,
So we
right? So
make
there's
up what it is, you know. We come up with, you know,
so
it,
diminishing versus non-diminishing would basically be because it's an abrasive, as I understand it from
yeah,
all the conversations we have,
yeah,
abrasives are basically rocks, right?
yeah, basically like a rock. I mean, you
And
know,
so you have rocks in this liquid,
yep,
right? And then a diminishing abrasive would be a starts as a big rock and goes
yep,
to a small rock
yeah,
as you
that's right,
work it on the panel. And then a
that's right.
non-diminishing would be it would stay the same size the whole time you're working it. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Okay.
It so if you look at a hardness scale, you know,
Mhm.
when we, you know, let's take something like talcum powder. It's not very hard. You know, we put it on our skin, you put it on babies. It's very soft. It feels soft. It feels silky. But it is part of the scale, hardness scale. And then you take a diamond at the other end of the scale. Obviously, you rub your skin enough with that, you're going to take your skin off.
Right.
So it's the hardest of the hardness scale. So for a formulator, you have to find the proper hardness and the proper size. And I hope by us doing this video and showing the competition that they're totally wrong, and you're going to get a lot of customers who are going to come on your side and buy your brand because your products work. You've done your homework, you've tested this on black cars and red cars and all this different stuff. And these other people would be like, well, you know, we need to either get on the bandwagon of
Mhm.
single product polish, or we need to say that Tom is on glue and he's totally wrong about this. But I think when we look at the science, there it's totally right that paint is limited. You know, the amount of paint that's on a car is limited. And if you do this wrong, you are responsible for destroying a paint finish. So that's, I hope that, you know, by us doing these videos and by us promoting single product polish, that we're going to cause the competition to stop building all these, which I think are absolute garbage products. I mean, if they did that on my black car, I would be so upset. And I've had so many customers in the past that were upset that, you know, their car was polished wrong.
What do you say? So compounds would be, I guess the rock size is too big and is does not break down. Is that
Yeah,
would be a
and I
compound, I
and
guess?
we're I mean we're saying, I mean, I could call our product, I mean, I could call my product compound, all the CSI line. I could say, well, they're compounds. I could say that they're compound. The difference is you don't need anything behind any one of our products. You're one and done. You're
Right.
finished.
Okay.
Do we have products that can take it to another level? Yeah, we do. But you're deliverable from any one product that we sell. You're totally deliverable. Pad changes, tool changes. You know, it changes the resolution of the finish by
Mhm.
using the proper pad, using the proper technique, whether it's, you know, weighted or unweighted. You know, and all those different things. So
So people say, "Oh,
compounds,
compound," because I've seen a few comments on our previous videos of like Tom's crazy. Like compounds are a necessity in the
no,
industry,
they're not.
and
And
it's
I've
really
met
just
them.
a made up term, right?
Yeah,
It's kind of like
it's made up. It's
even polish is a made up term
yeah,
to
it's
some
made up.
extent,
Yep,
right?
it
So
is.
it's and when it's becoming my understanding more too when you talk about a single product system, it's really the liquid that is the single product. And
Yes.
like you just mentioned, you are
Yeah.
depending upon the finish that you're looking for.
Hmm.
Because let's be honest, I mean, there's a truck in my neighborhood, and the sun hits it just right in the morning when I take my kids to school, and I could see all the swirl marks in that truck.
Yeah.
But to that customer, maybe that finish is fine,
Yeah.
right? Maybe
Exactly. Yep.
it's almost like orange peel. right? Like, or I look at it like orange peel used to kind of be a bad thing, and now
Yeah.
it's so common and it's so normal that people don't even think about it.
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder if swirl marks are like that for people. They almost think like it's a job better, like they got
Yeah.
a better job done. But
I've had people say that, look, I just had my car polished and I see all these swirl marks. It's like, did somebody tell you that looked good?
yeah, I just in another tangent, I was working on a private label account, and the customer, their current formula, it separates in the bottle. And I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, I was telling them like, well, hey, this is why it separates. This is what's separating. It probably shouldn't be separating. There's actually a way to make it not separate,
Yeah.
and sampled him the same thing and it didn't separate. And he was like, I don't know, man. It just, I think there's a case for separation. And I'm like, okay, do you want a sample that separates? And he's like, I think if we could do that, like that would be best. And I'm like, okay. So we made
And
a sample that, you know,
I love that, because here's what I say to those people. And I remember all the products that we used to use that separated, all of them. I mean, the wax shop, perfect product. I used tons of it, but it totally separated in a bottle. You look at it, the wax is oil on the top or bottom and water on the, opposite side. And it is like, what is that? Now, here's what I ask it. I mean, because this is to any formulator. Ask your wife if she would use that product on her face if it's separated. Nobody is ever going to use that product, ever.
Right.
So
well, I was thinking about that too, with like, because you had mentioned diamonds and stuff like that, kind of as an abrasive, and I'm like, I think about exfoliants, right? Like skin exfoliants or whatever, and it's like that. If you had an exfoliant that was making you bleed every time you used it, you probably wouldn't use it, right? But that's kind of like a parallel to like what it's doing on car paint, right? It's just ripping it. And so if you think of like my wife's constantly trying to get me to use like a face exfoliant or something, and she's like, have you been using that? And I'm like, no, because I don't know what it is or where it is. But I think the times that I do use it, I do think about, okay, because you can almost feel like the sandpaper in the product, right? But if it was making you bleed, you wouldn't use that, and you wouldn't use it. You don't even use it every day, right? You use it maybe a couple times a week, I guess. And so the same thing, I guess, would be true with car paint. Like, you're not going to want to compound your car every week or every month, right? But you could do a light polish on it, right? And so,
well, and why does a bottle, especially bottles that separate, why do they say shake first?
Right.
Well, they shake first so that you're using the proper combination of oil, water, and oil, water, and solvent. You have to have that perfect combination. If you have something that's homogeneous, meaning, completely connected together, it's not necessary to shake it. You're not going to, the aluminum oxide in the polish isn't going to fall to the bottom. The oil isn't going to float to the top, and then the water. So you want to have a nice, and today with the technology that we have, there's really no reason for people to have products, especially in the polish world. I don't want too much aluminum oxide hitting that surface, because now I'm doing damage that wasn't in the control of a fully emulsified product. So I think that's real important to what we're making too.
I took us off on a tangent, but going back to how you picked the pads for CSI and System 1, how did you go about that?
Yeah, it's one, that first person, like the guy that I'm talking to, I want something to go into his hands, which would be basically me going into any business, grabbing the secretary, somebody who I know has never, ever touched a tool or a product or a pad or anything. And I want to be able to put a combination together so that they, a girl, a guy, could go out in the sun and remove a scratch that's there, very, very light scratch, nothing heavy, using light pressure, and I wanted to remove it easily for them to see a difference. You know that we're doing a lot of these free classes now. We go into churches, we're going into high schools. All of us started at some time. And I think when my dad was teaching me, he wanted that light bulb to go off in my head. He wanted it. Our brain will work out how to get out those super heavy scratches, especially if we just give them the tools. So on that first pad combination, I want something minimally evasive. The product, that we've got, using light pressure just to take out a very, very light scratch pattern. And I think we've got the perfect, especially, when we started going down this path, the idea of no dust, in my brain, that's never going to happen. That is impossible. How can I take out a scratch that I see and not have any dust?
Why is that? Is that because the nature of the aluminum oxide is that it dust as it breaks down, or what is the dusting, I guess? Or why did you think that you couldn't make a product that didn't dust?
There's so many things that cause dusting. One, we're doing this in the sun. I want a product that does work in the sun. You don't have to do it in the sun. And I don't tell people, but I love, in a nice 80-degree day, we're going to have surface temperature 100, 120. I just love working and just looking at it, wiping it off. When it gets hotter than that, I don't want to do it in the sun because it hurts. Yeah. But on those kind of days, it does make it really nice. What was the question, Jimbo? Sorry, I got
what is you're crazy for loving to polish in the sun. I get too hot. I start getting exhausted too quick. No, I asked what was the thought behind when you were thinking that you couldn't create a product that doesn't dust? Because and you said there were so many things.
Yeah, there's so many things. And then I went off into the sun, and that is one of the things. So
because it's drying it out. Is that what's happening?
It's drying it out. Okay. It's going into a porous, normally foam pad for that super light polishing. And then you're going to get some exhausting from the product in the pad as it dries out.
It's just kind of the nature of what's going on. It's going to dust.
It definitely was the nature.
Okay.
But by building this product with you, we solved that problem. There's no more dusting. We're able to remove the scratch, and the pad, even though, you're not getting any dry dust coming off of that pad, which I believe is enhancing that finish even further. Because even on the CSI line, when you get that tiny bit of dust, it stops that product from going to the level, I'm going to say 99 to 100. And, I really like what we've been able to build now. It's something that I've never, ever seen before.
And because that would make sense too, right? Because in theory, if you're able to work, if you're using a non-diminishing abrasive, now I get tongue-tied on like, do I even call it a polish or a compound? Like these made-up names, right? But I guess industry standard names nonetheless. So if it's a non-diminishing abrasive, meaning it doesn't break down, and then the product's not drying out, so you're able to work that more on the surface, in theory, you would get a better finish, right? Until you reach a certain point. But I would imagine that all the other ingredients in the polish wouldn't allow you. I guess the product does have a long work time, but the work time is not infinity, right? Because I would think eventually you would have a point of diminishing returns, right? At some point.
It's every term that we've ever heard in the polishing world. And this, what we're doing now is truly jeweling the surface.
Yeah.
Because you can jewel it out to the highest level that I have ever seen in my 30 years of building product. I've never, ever seen a product jewel out this far.
Mhm.
It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
Mhm.
I don't think you
Yeah.
can make it any better. And here's my test is, I'm right here in Anaheim, and I've got a van that I paint these black panels on, and I go out and I color sand and polish and do all my stuff on that van. Well, I used our product on the side of this van, jeweled it completely out, and I'm looking at it going, wow. I wiped it all off with a microfiber towel, and you got to be careful, because if you push down too hard with the microfiber at this level, you're going to scratch the finish.
Right.
Just the microfiber. So then after I got it all, I was like, is this real or is this fake? And I left it out there in direct sun. And then I came back out about an hour later. Now it's baking hot. I mean, it's increased the temperature, and it still looks wet. And I took my hand and I ran my hand across it, just my hand, put scratches in the surface. I was like, wow, that is awesome. That's a beautiful finish.
And it's kind of why I don't, that point of like, you got to be careful with microfiber towels.
Yeah.
And then this idea behind like, okay, you're going to polish paint to perfection, and then
Yeah.
you're going to wipe it with a wax and grease remover before applying a ceramic coating. I'm like, man, like, hold on, guys. We got to figure out something there, because like
Yeah.
you can completely, and it's happened to detailers, right? They completely destroy the finish by trying to remove the excess oils, you know? And I'm like, huh.
Yeah,
We gotta,
it's like that whole idea of primer, oh my God, you're gonna touch the car again. The more times I touch it, when we were doing show cars, I mean, there was a point in time when nobody is allowed to touch the car. Nobody. You're not allowed. All the chrome is covered. We tape off all the chrome. The chrome doesn't get uncovered until we're at the show. And anybody touching the car, you have white gloves. You never, ever, ever touch the car with your bare hand, ever. You're not allowed.
right.
So, and because you're going to scratch it, you're going to put little tiny scratch marks in the paint. That's how fine you're making the paint. And it takes a lot of hours to get a paint job that nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, is there any, I guess I'm trying to narrow it down. I think because I was a big microfiber pad fan, but the more we used it together, the more I'm like, I don't think for this polish it's working how it's worked with other polishes for me. And so I've kind of, and then like, all things we've said about like your customer, for example, right? Like first time polishing, they're not going to know to like, oh, the fibers are getting matted down. I need to clean this out, right? They're just going to keep using it panel after panel. And so I am definitely headed back more towards the foam pad side of things. I feel like it's working better for the polish too.
Yeah, that's for me. I just,
but I'm like back and forth. And then I start getting irritated with myself, because I'm like, man, I'm overthinking this. Like it's supposed to be simple, not hard, right? Like why am I doing this? But I'm really trying to do the work to get people, do this, right?
I think about, because if I were to put on our website 12 different pads, and I go, it's going to work, and I can put down an explanation that this pad is going to do this and this pad is going to do that. But now if I'm going into a body shop and confuse that technician that much, I'm going to get kicked out of that body shop. These body men or these guys working in a body shop aren't like detailers who are looking for perfection. They're just trying to get it done. So I need to narrow it down. So for me, I mean, if I want to get down and get crazy and take out deep sand scratches that I've color sanded, we know, and we've done it with a wool pad. This product and a wool pad, boom, you're taking anything out. And then what would be the finest pad? It would be, what we've come up with as the absolute finest pad. So now you've at least got those guardrails up.
Right.
And then, on our line, we'll probably have just a couple pads in between there, and that's it. You can super light, super heavy, and a couple in between. That's it. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to confuse. For me, number one, I don't want to be sitting on the phone answering questions like, why
Right.
do I use this pad? And why do I use this pad? And just throw all those pads away and just use this pad?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, okay, I probably won't even launch it with a rotary wool pad because those are pretty common. You can kind of get them anywhere.
Yeah.
But definitely like the finished pad, maybe the wool. I'm not sure, but really that like one step, because I think that's going to be the biggest
Yeah, I think it
one,
is
and
too.
that's been the
I
one
think it
that's been hanging me up the most. For whatever reason, frustrated by it. So
I think it is. I think everything that we're doing is a mindset, and in a narrow path is a dangerous path.
yeah,
But if because people are like, what? Wait a minute, I need more options. Well, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? We're talking about paint finish. You don't have that many options. If you
right,
do this wrong,
right.
you're going to burn through the paint.
Mhm.
It's not like we're polishing 2-inch plastic. Who cares what
Right.
you use? You'll fix it sometime down the road and polishing that 2-inch piece of plastic. But you really
Yeah.
don't, on a new car, you don't have that many chances to get it right.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's why, I'm definitely trying to take the In-N-Out burger approach versus the
Yes.
McDonald's approach. And we
Hey,
see
I
a lot of
love that.
those, we see a lot of the, especially recently, a lot of the McDonald's approaches to car care,
Yeah.
where it's just, does it work? Yeah. Is it good? Yeah. But it's, mid-range, right?
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of mid-range products recently, and I'm trying to create the consistently good options, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love this single product approach, and I'm glad that you're going down it with
Yeah, I
me.
love it. I love it.
It's so much fun.
It
It's
is.
really, really fun.
It's been so much fun developing it. I love doing these podcasts and showing the development, and I love showing the frustration, because part of developing a product, for me at least, is seeing where that product fails.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
inevitably, so you talked about, you don't want those phone calls, but it's inevitable
Yeah.
that someone's going to call, give you lackluster information on what they did,
Yeah.
and they are going to have a bad result, probably based on some weird thing that they did that they didn't tell you,
Yeah.
and you're having to sit there on the phone and read between the lines as you get blindsided,
Yeah.
right? And I like to try to know every aspect of the product, right? Including where it doesn't work. So when someone calls and they're like, well, it's not removing the scratch, and you start, you're thinking paint the whole time, and all of a sudden 35 minutes in, they tell you that they're trying to remove a scratch on their leather seat, and you're like, what? Like, why are you using that on your leather seat, like, or on your dashboard, or like, but so for my products, I like to know to help mitigate being blindsided, right?
Yeah.
Like, where does it fail? And so that's part of my testing with all these different pads, is finding out, okay, when someone uses the wrong pad in the wrong situation, or, hey, I'm polishing in direct sun and it's drying out. And I know for a fact that doesn't happen 99% of the time. But then I remember, in my testing, I put the machine behind my back and used an old pad that I found in the trash, and, did blah, 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 did all these things. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I just like to know.
I'll tell you something that, and I've traveled all over the country selling our products and going into body shops, and you just don't know what you're going to walk into. And they say, well, I tried your stuff and it just doesn't work. And I go, okay, let's go back and let's go back through the simple instructions. And I go in, and this has happened. I mean, this is an actual event. I go in and his buffer with the pad is sitting on the ground. The buffer, the pad
side
on the floor. I'm like, oh, okay, first thing, maybe I didn't stress this enough. These pads need to stay clean. It's
right.
you just don't So you know, and I think it's probably true for every school teacher. It's like, okay, wait a minute, everything fell apart for a
Right.
reason. Let's look at why it fell apart.
Yep.
And
Yep.
just
And I like to try to do that because people like that's a perfect example. Like, well, your
yeah.
polish is pretty aggressive, and you'd be like, what? Like,
Yeah.
not even. And then you're like, oh my gosh, yeah. When you put it face down on the ground and you pick up all the dirt, like talk about abrasive. you
It's like
know,
sandpaper. Yeah.
like sandpaper. Yeah, well, no wonder why it doesn't work. But
Yeah.
that's what's been fun about testing at the fun side. It's been frustrating, but the fun side too of testing out all these different pads and talking with, you know, I've been talking with Rupes and Buff and Shine coming out at the same time and kind of hear their explanation of pads and their pad technology and how they're marketing it. And, you know, because so much of this too is marketing. Right. And a lot of it is marketing. Right. And so it's interesting to hear how they market, how their most successful, you know, customers market it, the technology in foam and how foam is, how it's made in these big sheets and cut and stamped and blah, blah. I'm like, wow. Like I thought I knew a lot. And then until we started doing this and I'm like, I know this is like starting car care completely over again. Right. In a whole new market.
I think it's so much fun, you know, and I hope, you know, and we know you know, we've studied other companies, you and me, looking at this company, this company. Everybody is running to single product polish. Everyone is,
because it makes so much sense. It just makes, it's like, duh.
Yeah,
you know,
I can tell you that I have never, since I started this in 1996, ever needed compound on anything that I've ever polished. Ever. I don't care what it is. I've never needed to use something with coarser. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm using 2000 grit sandpaper all the time. Wow, it's really working great. Let me try 80 grit. No, never. That's not going to work in place of 2000 grit ever.
Right.
You know, it's going to be a problem. You know, it's.
You know, one thing, one of my favorite attributes that I didn't even think was a problem. And it's funny, I gave a sample to a guy and I said, he said, well, what's your favorite part about it? And I said, well, besides the fact that it works, right? If all things being equal, because he was a big 3D1 user as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, it doesn't smell. And he's like, I don't care about that. He's like, I really don't care at all. I'm like, I know. I know. I'm with you. I didn't care either. Like 3D1 to me, it doesn't smell that bad. I'm like, until you use a polish or compound, whatever, that doesn't smell. And then you try to go back to 3D1 and you're like, why would I ever do that?
That's right.
Why? And I keep thinking, like, the more I use the polish and just continuing to test and this whole pad thing, you know, I've gone back to 3D1 a couple times to, like, you know, see where we're lining up.
And
I'm like, it smells so bad to me. I'm like, which is so weird because it never smelled bad to me. I never, it smelled. I always knew it had a smell, but it never bothered me until I used the sample that you made that has no smell at all. So and I'm like, this is so much more enjoyable.
Our nose gets used to every smell. Our nose. We bought a new house out in Chino as they were moving the cows out. I mean, way back in the 80s, brand new, but I mean, you could smell. Now, at first we bought it like, okay, that smell, you know, and the real estate people like, oh, that smell's going to go away. And we're like, oh, okay. And, you know, we're living there for years and we have a party and people go, what's that smell? Now, this is years later. There's no cows or that.
Right.
It's like, wow, we grew accustomed to that smell. They're coming out, and it wasn't bad years later. And by the time we sold that house, it wasn't bad at all 15 years later. But you know, when I used to buff with 3M Super Duty, I remember coming home and everybody around me going, what is that?
Yeah.
I hadn't taken a shower yet. I'm like, I don't smell anything. What are you talking about?
Right.
And that was that smell. So I think it's easy for a formulator to remove all smell. It's easy. You just have to buy better products. That's
what's so weird to me. It's like from a formulator saying it's easy to do that, and
yeah.
no one has done it. There's not
Yeah.
one, to the best of my knowledge,
Yeah.
there's not one polish or compound on the market that has zero smell.
Yeah, I know. And it was one of those things that irritated me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I put in this, you know, this kind of solvent or oil, and I smell it and go, oh, whoa,
yeah,
woo,
right.
What is that? And then I have to call the raw material people and go, don't you make something like this that doesn't have some? Oh, yeah, Tommy, it's going to cost you a little bit more. I don't care.
Right.
Just give it to me. I'm not
the
using
user
that much
experience
of it anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
The user experience is so much better with a non-smelling product.
Yeah, I agree.
But that is that's a reoccurring theme in this industry of like, oh, that's going to cost 25 cents more. Nah. And that's really what I've done with my whole line. And it's crazy how aligned we were on that when I didn't even know about compounds. Because if you would have made a smelly one, I would have been like, okay, like in line, right? But it's like, you know, I really try to get just like, is there a better material? I ask my other chemists all the time, like, okay, is there a better material? And he's like, well, yeah, but it's a little more expensive. I'm like, I don't care. I want it because it's going to be a better user experience. It's going to not separate, right? It's going to give a better end user experience. And that's what I'm after, right? I want high quality, because I think, like, I do think people will pay a couple bucks more for a bottle of something that is going to give them a far superior result, right? And I think 100%. People are, so I always think like, yeah, you know what? It'll be a little bit more expensive to the end user too, but once they try it and use it, they will love it, right? And there's a whole pricing strategy too of not being, you know, the cheapest person either. But anyway.
No, I think when you build a quality product and you're able to market the points on what makes that a quality product, you will sell it. Yeah. One, we're all looking for content. We're you know, I built a spaceship. Well, what's different with your space? You know, and then you go through the points. You go, all right, yeah, that might be a little bit safer to get in. You know,
right?
So
right. Costs a little bit more, but you'll probably arrive.
Yeah, you'll probably make it.
That's awesome. Well, Tom, how can people find you and buy your products that you got going on and all that?
So, you know, we launched the System One. Thank you, Jimbo. System1aps.com. That's where we're pushing the System One program. And then we have, you know, CSI Shine. Everybody's like, Tom, what'd you do? You got rid of CSI? No. We're selling tons of CSI, but I love this System One, bringing System One back out. And, you know, I feel like I love doing this with the kids. Kids that are just scatterbrained and don't know what they want to do. You put that tool in their hand and they polish something out and they're like, oh, wow, look at what I did. You know, it's so fun to see them light up. So I'm really excited on what we're doing right now.
That's awesome. And of course I have the Picture Perfect polish if people want to check that out. But Tom, thanks again for your time. Thanks for all your time and knowledge, just sharing all this and all the videos and everything. It's been so fun and more to come. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jimbo. Thank you for everything.